Listen, I've got Kelly Storm with me, and we're going to talk a little bit about the benefits of plants in indoors here. Okay, Kelly.
All right, first and foremost, I would say, is the fact that the trees give off oxygen during the day, which is a benefit to human beings, obviously. And so just having that improved quality, air quality in your office is a good thing, as well as just the serenity of having that green corner, lowers your stress level, gives you something to stare at if you need to think, those kinds of things.
Excellent.
So Jack, how do plants in the library enhance your experience?
Well, hey, I'm here in the library doing a little bit of bookwork. You can see that. What could be better here than plants over my head here, enjoying the green, enjoying the outside plants as well as the inside plants, and makes it a little easier to get the work done sometimes. Go.
So we're going to have to determine if this plant needs water or not. This one is a really good example of just if the soil looks dry and you can just see and touch. It doesn't take much to realize how dry that is, but you can even just see the grayish tone or the grayish cast of the soil. So you'll see that this plant, the visual signs of the fact that it doesn't need water is the fact that it's still quite dark in color. So you've got, it's not that gray color of dry soil, so it's quite dark. And then to the touch, you can feel there's plenty of moisture near the surface. If it was dry near the surface, but a little further down it was still moist, that would count as well. But here it's moist right to the surface. And then if you look up into the canopy, you'll see some yellow leaves that are not falling off. Yellow leaves that fall off mean that there's not enough turbident pressure to keep them attached to the plant, whereas yellow leaves that are firmly attached to the plant basically means that they're a little under stress and they're losing a few leaves, but it's probably due to overwater in this case. Okay? All right, so here we are at a situation, it's a large planter. There's a ground cover or an understory plant planted, as well as mulch. I don't know if you can see the mulch in here, but there's mulch on top. So to see the soil and be able to feel the soil is a little more difficult. So I can feel that it's kind of dry at the top there. But what I was getting at is how are some other ways that you can tell if plants need water? Well, the first thing is when you're coming up to it, you can assess the cast of the plant. If it's showing a nice bright green, shiny green, then chances are it's got enough water. In this case, it's a little on the dusty side, but you can see that it's broken a whole bunch of new leaves. And I find that when an interior plant breaks new leaves like that, that's kind of its perfect time to be watered. So in the growing season. So here's an example of a plant that isn't root bound right to the edges here. This was only put in here about 3 years ago, I believe. And so I can pretty much tell you that it was a 5-gallon pot because I remember helping out with that. The roots are not going to have reached the edge there of this container yet. It did have an undercover plant in it, but that's gone now. So the amount of water that this plant's going to need and where you're going to put that water is going to be different than the other big planting that we serve. So maybe the roots have started to come out to about here. So I'm going to water all of the surface, but I'm not going to soak all of the surface. I'm going to concentrate my water around where I know the roots will be. Okay, so this is the hibiscus that a month ago got so dry that there was not one leaf left on it, not one living leaf left on it. 3 weeks of picking dead leaves up, giving it a little prune back, and rehydrating it quite literally from the base. Just giving it enough water that it rehydrated. I haven't watered it since we did that, and I see it's just drying out now. So this is kind of an ideal moisture level, but I am going to give it just a little water because it's right next to this heater. This library is extremely hot, so I am going to give it a little water for that reason, because it's going to be a sunny weekend. I think it'll need a little bit, but I'm not going to overwater it. So it was one thirsty hibiscus, and it had been done exactly 2 weeks ago today really, really well, but obviously it cannot take a lapse like that. So I had given it that nice pre-watering a couple of times, maybe a gallon altogether. What's that? There's 4 liters. I'm going to give it a little bit more. You'll see there's no drainage holes on this. So whatever goes into this plant stays in this plant. With hibiscus, you can get away with that because it loves water. With any other plant, that would not be a good thing, but it boils down to the fact that you can't really overwater this plant. But I sure don't say that about very many plants. So our final way to determine plant watering requirements is if you've got a small pot like this, the easiest way to determine if it needs water or not is just to lift it. Plants themselves, the tissue in plants themselves weigh very, very little. It's the water and the moisture in the soil and in the plant tissue that has weight to it. So that's just the easiest way. If you can lift the plant, lift it. If it's heavy, even if it bends your wrist at all, it doesn't need water. If it's quite light, this one's quite light, I'm going to water it.
Perfect, yeah.
Okay, this Janet Craig is soaked, so I'm suspecting that somebody either watered it or it never dries out anyway, so even though I wasn't here 2 weeks, it's quite wet. So again, just taking off some of the more unsightly leaves, my philosophy is if it's ugly, remove it and it won't be so ugly. But there is a limit because some plants are just, every leaf is kind of rough. I'm not a fan of trimming them myself. If you are, that's fine, go for it. But it's not my thing. So I'm going to go over here to this peace lily. I'm not going to water that one at all because it's quite wet. Okay, quite the opposite. This peace lily will suck pretty much as much water as you can give it.
Feeling dry, is it?
A little bit. Actually, I'm amazed. I think maybe somebody did some watering in here. It's not as dry as I was suspecting, but I can see it had been dry, so I'm thinking maybe somebody, Carol perhaps, watered the plants, did you?
So here comes Carol Colenso-Fair,
I just love it.
and
My favorite technologist, Jack Berg.
I know, isn't this great?
we're having a little tutorial on watering because
Watering here,
pretty soon we're not probably able to do this anymore. So Carol, you could be the one that waters in the Bell E-Learning Center.
A lot of people just, water one spot, they pour all the water in one spot and they walk away. But really the best way to do it, if you think about the plant under here, this whole thing is just one big mass of roots. They're not all concentrated in the middle. And so the best thing to do is to pre-water, nice light watering, cover the whole surface. Try not to spill too much on this lovely carpet. So that's our pre-water. So if you think about this soil, dry soil, as a sponge, a dried out sponge, if you wave a sponge under the water, it's still hard and dry on the inside. So what we're basically doing here is allowing the moisture to get into those pores and sort of open it up like a dry sponge. The library, and again, because I wasn't here last week, these are pretty dry. So I'm just going to give a nice pre-water to all 5 of them, I believe it is. And then we'll just go back and do them again a couple of times, and that should be sufficient. Another bunch of nice low maintenance plants here. We've got, with the exception of that big old hibiscus in the southwest corner, they got some nice low maintenance stuff in here, so pretty forgiving. These plants are just finishing up. The yucca, and I can see down here when the water comes out the bottom, and that's what your goal is, to have the water go through the whole root system and start coming out the bottom. If you do that really rushed, it overflows all over your carpet. If you just do it gradually, then it's like soaking that entire sponge again. If you do it properly and you do it well, this whole bucket on these 2 plants, you don't have to come down here more than twice a month, so every other week is adequate. There we go. I just saw water starting to come out that bottom tray. Just starting to use up that bottom tray now. So we know that water's gone right through to the bottom roots. Okay, that's exactly what you want, but we're not going to say that.
Well, we had a little wreck here, but we're fixing it with the old turkey baster. So just suck that puppy out of there before it gets too much water in the rug. What a great system, eh?
High tech.
Yep.
So it's much better, in my opinion, to do a proper water and take the time it takes to water, and there's less time spending cleaning up. It's a very useful piece of equipment for watering interior plants. And you just need to know a couple little things about how to run it. And the first thing is irrigation. When the nozzle is, or the knob or whatever is turned perpendicular to the hose, that means it's off. When it's running parallel to the hose, that means it's on. Okay, so on, off, right? So those are the one big thing you've got to remember. So we're going to turn it off before we undo this brass nozzle. All right, so now we're going to attach the hose from the water tank onto the faucet in the janitor's area. And that takes a little alignment issues here, but once you have it nicely snug on there, and then the next thing you want to do is turn this on or put it to open, I guess, so it's running parallel. Okay, so right now that means that everything's open, ready to go. All we need is water, so turn this one on. And in this case, you also need to turn these wall taps on. So I turn on both the warm and the cold because you kind of want it to be room temperature anyway, and then I turn this on full blast. We know that that's on, we can hear water running into the tank. And now you just have to walk away for about 5 minutes. All right, so this plant has a tendency to grow upright, and a lot of plants, a lot of tropical plants continue to grow from the top, kind of like your fingernails. And every once in a while they just fall over because they're too top heavy. And so you can see that this plant has been cut off several times, and the top has just been planted, shoved right back down into the soil, and eventually it's taken root. So that's just a method of propagation. Right here, this old Dieffenbachia fell forward a couple of weeks ago. I suspect because it doesn't have a lot of light, so it doesn't have those really thick cells. So it's got kind of thinner walls to it, so therefore it doesn't quite have the rigidity. And then so what I did was I just propped it up behind the side pot, and it looks quite lovely.
Ron.
A lot of tropical plants have these air roots, and you know, orchids and ficus and things like that put down these air roots, and that is all they are, is just roots that get absorb humidity. That's a bit of a joke because we have no humidity, but absorb humidity out of the air. Can you cut them off? Sure, you bet you can cut them off, but don't cut them all off because that might send the plant into shock. But these ones that are laying on the ground, a good pair of pruners, you can cut them off. When they dehydrate, they come off all by themselves, as you will see. So that's what those are.
Good.
Now, just a little point of interest here. You see all the tips, the kind of water-soaked tips like that? That's generally from sitting in water. So this tray, I can see that people are worried that it hasn't had enough water, so they probably fill up the tray, and that is what you get as a result, is that kind of a classic sitting in water.
Overwatered, sitting in water.
Sitting in water.
Sure.
So watering plants and taking care of plants is kind of like doing dishes at home. If it doesn't get done, everybody notices. If it does get done properly, nobody notices, and really nobody appreciates it either. But you have to take your reward from the plants, and that is if you get growth and flowers. Healthy plants are your reward for taking care of the plants. They appreciate it.
Excellent. Okay.
Been to the Bell Center.
Wait a minute, I'm filming myself.
So I can tell, I don't know if you can see what kind of pressure that's putting on my thumb, but I can see, or I can just feel that that's got some weight to it, right? If it just went whoosh like this, then I would definitely water. But in this case, it's quite
Do
wet.
that again, I like that. There, we're filming. Whoops, I got it upside down. Okay, Wendy, say something to the camera.
Hi, Jack.
Hi. How are you?
Good.
This is a test. Okay, here we go.
There, that made that easy.